I watched my son bleed out on a stage decorated with paper snowflakes and candy canes. His Santa hat slipped off as I pressed my hands against the hole in his chest, trying to stop what couldn't be stopped. 3 gunmen had turned a second-grade Christmas play into a massacre. 7 kids died that night, but they made one mistake. They didn't know who I was before I became a father. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. My name is Adrian, and 6 years ago, I walked away from a life most people don't believe exists. Black Ops, the kind of work that doesn't make the news because officially, it never happened. I'd spent 12 years doing things in shadows that kept this country safe, and I was good at it. Too good. But when my son Oliver was born, I looked at his tiny face and knew I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be the man who took lives and then come home to create one. So, I quit. I became an insurance claims adjuster. Boring, safe, normal. My wife Natalie supported the decision completely. She never knew the full details of what I did, just that it was classified and dangerous. We bought a modest house in a quiet suburb outside Denver. Oliver grew up thinking his dad was the most ordinary man alive, and I was fine with that. I wanted him to have the childhood I never had. Stable, peaceful, full of little league games and homework help and bedtime stories. December 19th started like any other winter day. I left work early because Oliver's school was putting on their annual Christmas play. He'd been practicing his lines for weeks. He was playing one of the 3 wise men. Every night at dinner, he'd recite them with this serious expression that made Natalie and me laugh. He was 8 years old and took everything so seriously. The elementary school auditorium was packed with parents, grandparents, and younger siblings. Someone had strung lights along the walls and set up a small stage with a manger scene. Kids in bathrobes and tinsel halos waited backstage, their excited whispers filling the room. I sat in the 4th row with Natalie, holding her hand. She had her phone out, ready to record every second. The play started at 7 o'clock. The kids filed onto stage, nervous and adorable. Oliver wore a purple robe Natalie had sewn herself and carried a small wooden box painted gold. When he delivered his first line about bringing frankincense, his voice cracked a little. The audience chuckled warmly. I felt my chest swell with pride. This was what mattered, this moment right here. Then the back doors of the auditorium exploded open. 3 men in black ski masks stormed in, and the first gunshot made everyone freeze. For one horrible second, nobody moved, nobody screamed. We all just sat there, brains trying to process what was happening. Then the second shot hit the ceiling and panic erupted. Parents started screaming, grabbing their kids, diving under seats. But I didn't move like them. My body reacted differently. 12 years of training kicked in automatically. My eyes tracked the shooters' positions, their weapons, their movement patterns. 2 had pistols, 1 had a saw-off shotgun. They weren't professionals, their stances were wrong, their grips sloppy. Gang members, young ones. But none of that mattered because they started firing into the crowd. I shoved Natalie down and told her to stay low. Then I started moving toward the stage, toward Oliver. Kids were screaming, trying to run. Teachers were pulling them backstage, but it was chaos. The gunman with the shotgun fired into a group of parents near the front row. I watched a woman I recognized from the PDA collapse. Oliver stood frozen on stage, still holding his golden box, staring at the violence with wide, confused eyes. I was 15 feet away when the second gunman turned toward the stage and opened fire. I saw Oliver fall before I heard the shot. It's strange how the brain works in moments like that, how time stretches and breaks. I reached him in seconds, but it felt like hours. He was on his back, the purple robe already darkening with blood. His eyes found mine, and he tried to say something, but only a small sound came out. I got you, buddy. I got you. My hands pressed against his chest, feeling the warm pulse of blood that wouldn't stop around us. The shooting continued, more screams, more bodies falling, but my entire world had narrowed to my son's face. Dad! His voice was so small. You're okay. You're going to be okay. I was lying. I knew I was lying. I'd seen enough gunshot wounds to know this one was fatal. Center mass probably hit his heart or a major artery, he admitted at most. His small hand gripped my arm weakly. It hurts. I know it does, but I'm right here. I'm not leaving you. His eyes stayed on mine, trusting, scared, fading around us. The gunfire finally stopped. The shooters were yelling something, laughing maybe, and then I heard them run. Footsteps pounding toward the exit, car doors slamming outside, tires squealing. My training screamed at me to chase them, to track them, to end them right there, but I couldn't move. I couldn't leave Oliver, not now. Not for his last moments. "Where's Mom?" he whispered. "She's safe, she's right here." I looked up and saw Natalie crawling toward us, her face white with horror. When she reached us, she collapsed beside Oliver, taking his other hand. "Baby, we're here. Mommy and Daddy are both here." Oliver looked at her, then back at me. I forgot my line. The absurdity of it broke something inside me. Here he was dying, and he was worried about forgetting his line in a stupid school play. "You did perfect," I told him. "You were the best wise man I've ever seen." He smiled just a little. Then his eyes went distant and his grip on my arm loosened. I felt the exact moment he stopped breathing, felt the life leave his small body. And I kept holding him, kept pressing against the wound even though it didn't matter anymore. Natalie was sobbing, saying his name over and over. Around us, other parents were doing the same, crying over children who wouldn't wake up. 7 kids total. 7 families destroyed in less than 3 minutes. Sirens wailed outside. Police and ambulances flooded the parking lot, but they were too late. They were always too late. I sat there on that stage holding my dead son, and something cold settled deep in my chest. Something I thought I'd left behind 6 years ago. The paramedics finally pulled Oliver from my arms. Natalie had to be sedated. I stood slowly covered in my son's blood and watched the chaos around me. Parents being interviewed by police, bodies being covered with sheets. A Christmas play turned into a crime scene. A young cop approached me, notebook in hand, asking if I saw anything. I told him 3 shooters, all masked, gang age, probably late teens to early 20s. The one with the shotgun had a teardrop tattoo visible on his neck below the mask. They moved with the recklessness of initiation violence. No strategy, just maximum chaos. The cop wrote it down, looking impressed and disturbed that I'd noticed so much detail during a massacre. He didn't know who I used to be. Nobody did. They let me ride with Natalie in the ambulance. She stared at nothing, silent now, the sedative taking hold. I held her hand and felt nothing, no tears, no rage, just cold calculation. The shooter's movements replayed in my mind, the way they entered, the direction they fled, the weapon types, the visible tattoo, the laughter. They'd killed my son. They had killed 7 innocent children during a Christmas play, and they'd laughed. I made a decision sitting in that ambulance. The police would investigate, they'd follow leads, they'd maybe arrest someone eventually, but I wouldn't wait for maybe. I wouldn't wait for justice that might never come. I knew how to find people who didn't want to be found. I knew how to make people disappear, and I knew exactly where to start. Those 3 shooters had no idea what was coming for them. The chapel was packed with people, but it felt empty. Empty like the space Oliver left behind. The preacher's words washed over me like noise, but my mind was somewhere else, stuck in that auditorium with my son bleeding on the stage. Natalie sat next to me, her face pale, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. She hardly seemed present, her body numb, broken by grief. I looked out at the crowd and saw faces I knew. Parents who lost children, friends offering hugs that couldn't reach the depth of pain they all felt. I could see the weight in their eyes, a shared horror, and yet nobody spoke the question I had burning inside my chest. Why? Why Oliver? Why 7 kids dead in a place meant for innocence? Later, the funeral home's chapel was quiet. The coffin sat heavy between us, covered in poinsettias and holly. I knelt beside it, my hands trembling as I touched the polished wood. "I'm so sorry, son," I whispered. I was supposed to keep you safe, but those words felt hollow. No soldier trained to protect could save an 8-year-old from a hail of bullets fired in cold blood. Days passed, but the memories were constant and fresh like they happened yesterday. I found myself wandering back to the school, unable to keep away. The auditorium was boarded up, windows covered in plywood. I circled to the side entrance where the gang had forced their way in. Near the back, a wall caught my eye, fresh graffiti staining the paint. A jagged cross with a snake coiling through it, a familiar symbol from my past missions. This was the mark of the serpents, a ruthless gang controlling the city's underworld. Something inside me tightened. That spray paint was a message, a signature. The police dismissed this as random gang violence, part of a turf war, but I knew different. This was a warning. I took pictures with my phone. The angle of the graffiti suggested someone wanted it seen, but only by those who recognized it. Back home, I sorted through scraps of information, scanning gang databases, talking to old contacts I'd hoped to never contact again. 2 days later, a slick black car stopped in front of my house. Detective Morgan stepped out. She looked tired but determined. "I know what this is to you," she said quietly, handing me a thick envelope. "We got what you asked for. Partial footage from a traffic camera caught these guys fleeing. It's grainy, but you'll recognize them." Late that night, alone in the basement, I pulled out an old laptop and played the footage on loop. 3 masked men sprinted through the school parking lot. One sported a clearest mark, a teardrop tattoo on his neck shining beneath the streetlight. Not professionals, not military, but they moved with a confidence born of experience. My hands trembled as I paused the frame. The tattoo was a clue, one I knew well from my old files. The serpents ran this part of the city. Morgan's words echoed. "You have to understand, Adrian, we don't have much. The department's stretched thin." She meant there wouldn't be any real investigation. Not the way I needed. I knew I couldn't wait for justice that might never come. Opening my basement door, I found the dust thick over the years, but inside my hidden compartment, a glimmer of my past life awaited. The lockbox I'd sealed shut 6 years ago was still there, behind a false panel. It held my gear, black leather holsters, combat knives, radios, and a pistol with custom grips. I sat on the floor, the cold concrete grounding me as I opened the box fully. My fingers brushed over worn leather gloves, and a combat vest still scented faintly of cedarwood, my identity all sealed away in silence for years. But a father's grief was a stronger call than all the promises of a quiet life. I pulled out a weathered map of the city and circled the school's location. My gaze hardened as I traced routes out of the city, places the shooters might disappear to. We buried our son, but I was still holding on to his blood-stained legacy. The serpents thought they could get away with this brutal act, the massacre of 7 children during a Christmas play. They didn't know I wasn't the man I appeared to be anymore. The quiet life was over. It had been replaced by a dark mission. I had a list to make, and no amount of grief was going to hold me back. The night I grabbed the gear from my basement, I wasn't the man I had been for the past 6 years. Adrenaline surged like a river breaking through a dam. The scratches on my knuckles from loading magazines, the cold steel of the pistols and knives, it all felt like coming home. But this time it wasn't for mission orders or country. This time it was for my son Oliver, for the 7 kids gone, for every innocent life taken from us. Natalie didn't understand at first. When I told her I needed to leave for a while to get some distance and think, she only nodded, her eyes hollow. That night, I packed my bag silently and slipped out, telling her it was just for a few days. Neither of us said the real reason, that I was going to hunt down the men who had shattered our family. Denver streets at midnight were quiet, except for the shadows that flickered beneath the streetlights. I wasn't just a grieving father anymore. I was a wolf back on the hunt. I started with the getaway vehicle. From the footage Detective Morgan gave me, I recognized a beat-up white van used by the shooters. Police reports confirmed the van was found abandoned near a chop shop on the east side of the city, known for illegally modifying stolen vehicles. I drove through neighborhoods I barely remembered from my past life, places I never wanted to see again. The chop shop was a warehouse hidden behind crumbling brick and graffiti that covered every inch of the walls. Inside, the smell of grease, burnt rubber, and desperation clung to the air. I watched from the shadows as mechanics worked, oblivious to the storm approaching. Then I spotted a kid no older than 20, nervously wiping his hands on his oily jeans. That was my target. I approached him quietly, just enough to catch his attention. "Heard you worked on a white van recently." The kid jumped, eyes wide and darting. "I don't know nothing, man, just fixing cars." But I saw the fear beneath his mask. I wasn't here to play games. I know Dominic runs this place. The name hit him like a punch, and I know the van was his. His hands shook as he wiped them again, voice low. "Dominic, he's bad news. You don't want to mess with him." "No one's messing, kid. Just talk." He spilled what he knew. A gang initiation gone wrong. A brutal rite where they forced new members to kill at least one innocent. The Christmas play had been the target. The snakes in that graffiti, the serpent's sign. Dominic was the leader. I filed his information away silently. Leaving the warehouse, I realized the scope was bigger than I imagined. This wasn't just street gang violence. It was something calculated. A message sent to the city through blood. My next step was clear. Find Dominic. Back in my rented motel room, I spread out city maps, surveillance photos, and gang intel. I was back to being the hunter, back to navigating a world of secrets and shadows. Days of surveillance finally paid off. Dominic was spotted at a rundown bar on Denver's north side, surrounded by his crew. They were careless, drinking heavily, boasting about the massacre like it was a trophy. I waited until dark and slipped inside. The bar stank of cheap beer and lost souls. I found Dominic nursing a shot, his tattooed arms crossed, a smug grin playing on his lips. I approached, calm but cold. "You're Dominic, right?" He looked up, eyes narrowing as the room's noise dimmed around us. "Who's asking?" "Someone who knows what you did." My voice was steady, but inside fire burned. 7 kids dead, my son among them. The smile vanished. Dominic reached for his jacket, but I was faster. 2 moves from my old life erased the space between us. A knife flashed across his throat silently. He dropped, clutching the cut. "You messed with the wrong target," I said, voice low. In a burst of panic, Dominic pleaded, "It wasn't all me. There were 5 shooters." I pressed harder, exhausting the patience of a man who once thought himself untouchable. "Names?" "Who else?" His eyes darted, desperation sharpening. "Tristan Ryder and 2 others. Before he could say more, he collapsed. I left him there with a warning. "Tell the others or they'll be next." Tristan was next to fall, a staged overdose that made the headlines. Ryder, however, vanished before I could reach him. His paranoia was real. Everyone close to him warned of shadows waiting at every turn. Then the nightmare came home. Natalie found my jacket, spotted the bloodstains and dirt. She confronted me with tears and shattered trust, asking me what I was doing. The man she married wasn't supposed to be this broken, this dangerous. I told her the truth in part, the fight I was forced to take on for Oliver. Her face fell. "Just finish it, but come back to me." I nodded, knowing she was holding on to a fragile hope that I could find justice without losing myself. A new lead brought me across state lines to Ryder's cousin's house. This was the last place Ryder might slip through legal cracks and gang networks. I arrived under the cloak of night, heart steady under years of training. This fight wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure no other parent felt the pain that swallowed me whole that December night. Ryder would soon learn the price. The night was cold and unforgiving, the kind of cold that drags the warmth out of your bones and leaves only the barest flicker of life behind. Ryder's cousin's house stood weak and forgotten on the edge of a run-down neighborhood where the streetlights flickered like dying stars. I parked a few blocks away, watching from the shadows. This was a place where people disappeared, forgotten by the world, and lost to their own demons. I wasn't a man who chased ghosts anymore. This was real. The boy who helped fire those shots was here somewhere. Ryder, the last face I needed to find before I could piece together who was truly behind the nightmare that destroyed my son's life. Minutes crawled by like hours as I scanned every flicker of movement. Finally, headlights cut through the dark and a battered car pulled up. Ryder stepped out, a shadow among shadows with his hood low over his face and nerves glaring in his eyes. The training from my Black Ops days took over. I moved silently, plotting my approach so I wouldn't spook him into running or calling for help. I fell into step beside him, the weight of the gun inside my coat reassuring and cold. "Ryder," I said, voice low but clear. He froze, panic flaring instantly. His eyes darted everywhere, calculating escape routes that didn't exist. "Don't run, just listen." I kept my tone even slow. "I'm not here to hurt you, not yet." His defiance cracked with fear. He staggered to a nearby bench beneath a sickly street lamp that cast half his face in shadow. His hands shook as he sat, attempting to control the storm inside. "I asked you here to talk," I said, eyes locked on his face. "You were one of the shooters. You know who hired you? Why this happened?" Ryder sucked in a shaky breath, his facade cracking. "It wasn't just initiation," he whispered, terrified, but desperate to explain. "There was someone else, someone paying, a man named Preston. Mr. Preston, he's rich, powerful." The name hit me like a punch. Preston was a clean, slick face in the city's elite. A developer with political ties who everyone assumed played by the rules. But apparently, money could buy more than buildings. It could buy blood. Ryder's voice caught. He wanted the school land for a project. The school board wouldn't sell, so he wanted to scare them off. He paid us to make the massacre happen. The cold rage that flared in me was worse than any battlefield. 7 kids, shredded hopes, crushed futures, all for a real estate deal. I leaned in close, voice steady but deadly. Who else was involved? Names. His eyes darted, and he named Tristan and Kyle along with 2 others. They're all hiding now. I stood, settling the weight of all I'd heard. Your role ends now, he begged. Please, I was scared. They threatened my family, but tears didn't erase bullets. As I turned to leave, a warning stopped me. Beware the judge, Ryder murmured. Preston's got eyes everywhere. That struck a chord deep within me. This fight was not only with gangsters, but with a system rigged to protect the guilty. Back at my motel, I began digging deeper into Preston, the untouchable man behind the curtain. His investments, his lawyers, his political favors, walls built to protect his empire. But a Black Ops warrior doesn't quit. I wasn't here to just pull names from shadows. I was here to dismantle an empire. The battle had changed. It was no longer just about vengeance. It was about justice for those who had no voice. And I was ready to become the storm. The motel room was dim, a single lamp casting long shadows across the maps and files I spread on the table. Details of Preston's empire sprawled out. A labyrinth of construction companies, political donations, and legal loopholes designed like traps. He was a man who rubbed shoulders with power, untouchable behind polished suits and glistening smiles. The kind of man who made sure no one stood in his way. But even kings have cracks. I spent days piecing together data, talking to old contacts, scratching beneath the surface of Preston's glossy public image. His name surfaced again and again, the man behind the curtain who could make the school board buckle or twist the law like a toy. But he wasn't reckless. He was patient. That made him dangerous. I was preparing to make my next move when Natalie found my jacket. Bloodstains half-dried, dirt crusty around the cuffs. Her eyes caught the crimson blotches like an alarm bell. "What's going on?" she demanded softly, voice trembling with fear and suspicion. I froze, caught between the man I had been and the one I was becoming. I knew my answers would either tear us apart or pull her into a fight she might not want. "I'm not who you think I am," I said quietly. "I'm trying to make this right." Her face crumpled. "Adrian, we barely have each other left. Don't lose me too." A heavy silence hung between us, charged with everything unsaid. She didn't know what I was truly facing, or what it would cost, but the look in her eyes, a mix of fear, pain, and something like hope, told me she trusted me to finish what had to be done. Taking a deep breath, I told her I had a lead. Ryder's safe house across state lines, the place where the last shooter might be hiding. Before I left, Natalie touched my face, steady and quiet. "Promise me, come back no matter what." I nodded, knowing the vow was unbreakable. The journey to Ryder's cousin's house was long and silent. Every mile drove my resolve deeper. No distractions, no second chances. That night I came prepared. Not just as a father burning for justice, but as a soldier ready for war. Silent as a shadow, I watched the house, its broken fence and peeling paint hiding secrets beneath a veneer of neglect. I wasn't here to knock politely. When Ryder appeared, hood low and eyes wild, I wasted no time. My approach was calm, calculated. His panic was raw and immediate, a cornered beast trying to find escape routes that didn't exist. There was no easy conversation, only the slow unraveling of truths I wasn't prepared for. "Preston's behind it all," Ryder confessed, voice cracking with the weight of fear. "He paid us to shoot up the school, to force their closure. It was about land, about money." My heart clenched. A real estate developer's greed had cost 7 kids their lives. I demanded names, details, planning. Ryder gave me what he could. His voice faltered, but the story came out. Dangerous, wide-reaching. Before I left, he warned me of Preston's reach, his protection inside the justice system, and the shadowy judge and lawyers at his command. The game had changed drastically. Back in my motel room, I spread out each piece like a war plan. I wasn't just hunting gangsters anymore. I was facing a titan protected by money, influence, and fear. And I was on a collision course. But even as I planned, the quiet fear inside me bubbled. How do you fight a devil with an army of angels? The answer was simple: you become the storm no one expects. The interstate stretched endlessly ahead, headlights cutting through the dark like knives. Every mile brought me closer to Ryder, closer to answers, closer to the truth I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight, knuckles white. The weight of everything, Oliver's blood, Natalie's broken eyes, the empty space where my son should be, pressed down like a stone on my chest. Ryder's cousin lived in a forgotten corner of a neighboring state. The kind of place where people minded their own business, and questions died before they were asked. The house was small, painting, windows dark except for a single flickering light in the back room. I parked 3 blocks away and moved through the shadows like I'd done 1,000 times before in another life. Surveillance came naturally. I watched the house for hours, mapping exits, counting occupants, noting patterns. Around midnight, Ryder appeared, nervous, checking over his shoulder every few steps. He was scared. Good. Fear made people careless. I waited until he separated from the others, slipping out the back door for a smoke. That's when I moved. He didn't hear me coming. One moment, he was alone in the dark. The next, I had him pinned against the fence, my forearm across his throat, just hard enough to make breathing difficult. "Don't scream," I whispered. "Don't run, just talk, and maybe you walk away." His eyes went wide with terror, recognition flooding his face. He'd heard what happened to the others. Tristan found dead, Kyle vanished without a trace. He knew who I was, what I wanted. "Please," he gasped. "I didn't want to do it. They made me." I loosened my grip slightly. "Then tell me everything. Start with why." We moved to a darker corner away from windows and prying eyes. Ryder slumped against a wall, hands shaking as he lit another cigarette with trembling fingers. "It was supposed to be simple," he started, voice low and broken. "Dominic said it was initiation. You want in the serpents, you prove yourself, you do something big, something that gets attention. 7 kids dead, that's what you call attention." He flinched. I know, man, but there's more. Something I didn't tell anyone because I was scared they'd kill me for knowing." My pulse quickened. "Talk." Ryder took a long drag, smoke curling into the night air. "The school shooting, it wasn't random. It wasn't just us trying to prove ourselves." He looked at me, fear and guilt wearing in his eyes. "We were hired." The words hit me like a bullet. "What?" "A man paid us $50,000 cash. He wanted that specific school hit on that specific day. Christmas play and everything," he said. "The more chaos, the more dead kids, the better." My blood turned to ice. Who we called him? Mr. Preston. Rich guy, real slick, wore expensive suits, drove a black Mercedes. Dominic met with him twice. I was there for the second meeting. Ryder's voice cracked. Preston said he wanted maximum impact, wanted the school destroyed, not the building, but the spirit of it. Wanted parents too terrified to ever send their kids back. I grabbed him by the collar, pulling him close. "Why? Why would anyone pay for that?" "I don't know everything, but I heard Preston talking about the land. He said once the school shut down from lawsuits and trauma, he could swoop in and buy it cheap. Some big development deal, shopping center or condos or something. The school board kept rejecting his offers, so he decided to force their hand. The truth unraveled before me like a nightmare. My son, my beautiful innocent Oliver, died because some wealthy developer wanted land for profit. 7 kids murdered, families destroyed, all for money. You're telling me this was a business decision?" My voice was deadly calm. Ryder nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Preston said it was perfect. Blame it on gang violence, random tragedy. No one would ever connect him. He paid us to do his dirty work and disappear." Rage burned through me, hotter than anything I'd felt before. The gang members were puppets. Preston was the one pulling strings. Where is he now? I don't know, I swear. After the shooting he vanished. Dominic said Preston paid half up front, half after, but we never got the second payment. He just disappeared like smoke. I released Ryder, stepping back. My mind raced through scenarios, plans, angles. This changed everything. The mission wasn't just about punishing shooters anymore. It was about exposing a monster who hid behind wealth and power. "There's more," Ryder whispered. "Preston has protection. High up, cops, judges, lawyers. He's got people on his payroll. Dominic warned us that if we ever talked, we'd disappear for good. Not by his hand, but by people we'd never see coming. A corrupt system protecting a murderer." I should have been surprised, but I wasn't. I'd seen it before in my Black Ops days. Evil hiding in plain sight, shielded by money and connections. "You're going to help me find him," I said. Ryder's eyes widened. "Are you crazy? He'll kill me. He'll kill both of us. He already killed my son. He's got nothing left to take from me." The fear in Ryder's face was raw and real. For a moment, I almost pitied him. A kid who made a terrible choice and couldn't escape the consequences. But pity wouldn't bring Oliver back. "One more thing," Ryder said quietly. Preston mentioned something about insurance, said if anything went wrong, he had recordings, documents, proof that could bring down half the city's leadership. He called it his safety net. That detail sparked something in my mind. If Preston had evidence, it meant he was careful, calculated. It also meant he had weaknesses, places where pressure could crack his armor. I left Ryder there with a warning. Disappear, change your name and pray I never see you again. He nodded frantically, scrambling away into the darkness. Alone in the cold night, I stood under a flickering streetlight and felt the weight of this new mission settle over me. Preston wasn't just a name anymore. He was a target, a man who thought money made him untouchable, who believed he could murder children and walk away clean. He was wrong. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. Old contacts, people who owed me favors, shadows in the intelligence world who could find anyone. Preston's face, his addresses, his businesses, his secrets. I'd uncover them all. The hunt had evolved. This was no longer about revenge on street thugs. This was about tearing down a system that protected evil and making sure every person responsible for Oliver's death faced justice, even if I had to become the monster to do it. The drive back to Denver felt different this time. The road blurred beneath my tires, but my mind was sharp, cutting through the fog of grief and rage to focus on something more dangerous. Calculated precision. Ryder's confession had ripped open a wound I didn't know existed. My son wasn't killed by random gang violence. He was murdered as part of a business transaction. 7 innocent children sacrificed on the altar of greed. Preston. The name burned in my mind like a brand. Back in my motel room, I pulled out my old encrypted laptop, the one I'd kept hidden for 6 years, gathering dust alongside the life I thought I'd left behind. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory, accessing networks and databases most people didn't know existed. Black Ops left you with certain privileges, certain doors that never fully closed. I started with public records. Preston wasn't hiding. Men like him never did. They believed their wealth and status made them invincible. Victor Preston, age 47, CEO of Preston Development Group, one of the largest real estate firms in Colorado. His face stared back at me from the screen. Handsome, in that polished artificial way. Perfect teeth, expensive haircut, eyes that smiled but held no warmth. The kind of man who shook hands with mayors and senators who donated to children's charities while plotting their deaths. His company's portfolio was impressive. Luxury condos, shopping centers, corporate parks, every project worth millions, each one expanding his empire. But as I dug deeper, cracks appeared in the pristine surface. 3 years ago, Preston had proposed a massive mixed-use development retail space. Apartments, office buildings right in the heart of the neighborhood where Oliver's school stood. The project was worth an estimated $200 million. But there was a problem. The school sat on prime land, and the school board refused every offer Preston made. They'd rejected his proposals 5 times over 2 years, citing community needs and the importance of keeping the school operational, so Preston found another solution: remove the school by force. I pulled up news articles from the days following the shooting. Parents demanding the school close. Lawsuits filed against the district for inadequate security. City council meetings where residents pleaded for the building to be demolished. Too traumatized to imagine children returning there. Within weeks, the school board announced indefinite closure pending safety reviews and community healing. Preston's path was clear. I checked property records dated just days after the announcement. Preston Development Group had submitted a new proposal to purchase the land, offering below market value, citing the tragic circumstances that made the property undesirable. The proposal was still pending, but I knew how these things worked. Pressure from above, quiet deals in back rooms, and eventually Preston would get exactly what he paid $50,000 in blood money to achieve. My hands trembled as I closed the laptop. The depth of his evil was staggering. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was cold, calculated murder dressed up as business strategy. But Preston hadn't counted on one thing: a father who knew how to hunt monsters. I needed more than information. I needed leverage. Preston would be protected by lawyers, bodyguards, and corrupt officials on his payroll. Going after him directly would be suicide. I had to be smarter. I called an old contact, Grant, a former intelligence officer who now worked private security. We'd served together in operations that officially never happened. If anyone could get me inside Preston's world, it was him. Adrian. Grant's voice carried surprise and caution. Been a long time. I need a favor. Always do. A pause. Heard about your son. I'm sorry, man. The sympathy hit harder than expected, but I pushed through it. The people responsible aren't who everyone thinks. I need intel on Victor Preston. Grant whistled low. Preston Development. That's heavy. What's your angle? He paid gang members to shoot up my son's school. 7 kids dead so he could buy the land cheap. Silence stretched between us. Then Grant's voice returned. Parter, now send me what you have. I'll dig. 2 days later, Grant called back with a file that painted an even uglier picture. Preston had a history, nothing prosecutable, but patterns that told a story. 3 previous development deals where obstacles mysteriously disappeared. A community organizer who opposed one of Preston's projects found dead from an apparent suicide. A city inspector who flagged safety violations in another Preston building suddenly transferred to a different state. Whistleblowers silenced. Witnesses vanishing. Preston was a professional at making problems go away, but Grant had found something else. Preston's head of security was a man named Hunter Blackwell, former military police with a reputation for brutality. Blackwell ran a tight operation. Armed guards, surveillance, background checks on anyone who got within 50 feet of Preston. Getting close would be nearly impossible. There's more, Grant said. Preston's got a lawyer named Julian Cross. Real piece of work. Cross specializes in making evidence disappear and witnesses recant. Rumor is he's got half the district attorney's office in his pocket. The corruption ran deeper than I imagined. Preston had built himself a fortress of money and fear, confident no one could touch him. What about weak points? I asked. Grant paused. Everyone's got them. Preston's is arrogance. He thinks he's untouchable, so he gets careless sometimes. Meets with people in semi-public places. Conducts business over phones he thinks are secure. If you could get close enough, catch him saying something incriminating. An idea formed, dangerous, probably insane, but possible. I spent the next week studying Preston's routine. His office was downtown in a glass tower with his name on it. He drove a black Mercedes just like Ryder described. Bodyguards shadowed him constantly, but there were moments, brief windows where he was vulnerable, restaurants where he conducted business lunches, a private gym where he worked out at 6 o'clock in the morning, a mistress's apartment he visited on Thursday nights while his wife stayed home in their mansion in the hills. Preston was a creature of habit, and habits could be exploited. I also started looking into the judge Ryder mentioned, Judge Quinton Marshall. His name appeared frequently in Preston's court cases, always ruling in the developer favor. Campaign contributions from Preston to Marshall's re-election fund. Photos of them golfing together. The judge was bought and paid for. Another piece of Preston's protective armor, but even armor had seams. Late one night, I sat in my car outside Preston's office building, watching lights flicker in windows high above. Somewhere up there, Preston was probably celebrating another victory. Another deal closed, another obstacle removed. He had no idea that the father of one of his victims was sitting below, planning his downfall. My phone buzzed. Natalie, are you okay? Her voice was small, fragile. I'm getting closer. Adrian, please be careful. I can't lose you too. You won't. I promise. But promises were easy to make and hard to keep. After we hung up, I stared at Preston's building and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about punishing the shooters anymore. This was about exposing a system so rotten, it allowed men like Preston to murder children for profit. If I could take him down, make him answer for what he'd done, maybe, just maybe, it would mean something. Maybe Oliver's death wouldn't be meaningless. I pulled out a notebook and began sketching a plan, getting Preston on record, admitting his involvement, building a case so airtight even his corrupt lawyers couldn't dismantle it. Delivering that evidence to people who couldn't be bought, federal investigators, national media, anyone with the power to bring him down. It was risky. It would require me to get closer to Preston than was safe, but I'd faced worse odds in worse places. The hunter had his target. Now came the hard part, the approach. The plan forming in my mind was dangerous, but danger was something I understood. What I needed now was someone on the inside, someone with legal authority who could turn evidence into action. That's when I remembered the news footage from Oliver's funeral. A woman standing apart from the crowd, tears streaming down her face as they lowered a small casket into the ground. Her name was Paige Winters, and she'd buried her 7-year-old niece that day. Finding her wasn't difficult. She was a prosecutor with the district attorney's office, known for taking on cases nobody else wanted. Her reputation was solid, tough, relentless, unwilling to bend under pressure. If anyone could help me expose Preston, it was her. I showed up at her office unannounced on a Tuesday morning. The receptionist tried to turn me away, but I'd already anticipated that. Tell her Adrian's here. Tell her it's about the school shooting. 5 minutes later, I sat across from Paige in a cramped office stacked with case files. She looked tired, hollowed out by grief that mirrored my own. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee neither of us would drink. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Because the men who killed our children were hired, and the man who paid them is still walking free." Her expression shifted from guarded to alert. "What are you talking about?" I laid out everything. Writer's confession, the $50,000, Preston's development plans, the school board rejections. I showed her documents Grant had compiled, property records, financial trails, timelines that connected Preston to the massacre with chilling precision. Paige studied the evidence in silence, her prosecutor's mind working through each piece. Finally, she looked up, anger and disbelief wearing in her eyes. If this is true, it's massive, but it's all circumstantial. No court would touch this without direct proof. That's why I need your help. We get Preston on record admitting what he did." She leaned back, suspicion creeping across her face. "And how exactly do we do that?" "Walk up and ask him nicely." "No, we trick him." Over the next hour, I explained my plan. Preston believed he was untouchable, insulated by money and power, that arrogance was his weakness. If I could pose as someone useful to him, someone offering solutions to future problems, he might let his guard down. Men like Preston loved having fixers, people who handled dirty work while they kept their hands clean. Paige listened, her skepticism gradually giving way to grim determination. "This could end your life. Preston has connections everywhere. If his people catch you wearing a wire, they already took my son. There's nothing left to threaten me with." Something in my voice must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this my way, legal, by the book. Otherwise, any confession we get will be inadmissible. As long as Preston goes down, I don't care how we do it." She made arrangements quickly. A high-quality recording device, small enough to hide, sophisticated enough to capture clear audio even in difficult environments. She also contacted a federal agent she trusted, someone outside Preston's sphere of influence who could act on evidence if we got it. The trap was set. Getting Preston's attention required careful maneuvering. Through Grant's contacts, I created a background for myself. Logan Marshall, a contractor with connections to organized crime, who specialized in problem solving. The kind of man who made obstacles disappear and didn't ask questions. Grant spread word through channels Preston monitored, planting seeds about this new fixer available for hire. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unlisted number. A smooth voice on the other end introduced himself as Julian Cross, Preston's lawyer. "Mr. Marshall, I represent a client who may have use for your services. Are you available for a consultation? Depends on the client and the price. Both will exceed your expectations. Can you meet tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock Riverside Grill downtown?" I agreed, keeping my voice casual, uninterested. Inside, my pulse hammered. The trap was working. The next evening, I arrived at Riverside Grill dressed like money. Expensive suit, polished shoes, the costume of a man who operated in shadows but profited in luxury. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place where deals happened over steak and whiskey, while the world outside remained oblivious. Julian Cross waited in a private booth at the back, but he wasn't alone. Victor Preston sat beside him, looking exactly like his photos, polished, confident, radiating the entitlement of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "Mr. Marshall," Cross said, gesturing to the seat across from them, "thank you for coming. This is my client, Mr. Preston." I shook Preston's hand, fighting the urge to crush every bone in his fingers. This was the man who'd ordered my son's death, who'd calculated 7 children as acceptable collateral damage. But I kept my expression neutral, professional. "I've heard good things about your work," Preston said, studying me with sharp eyes. "Julian tells me you're discreet." "Discretion's my specialty." We ordered drinks. Small talk followed, surface-level pleasantries designed to assess each other. Preston was careful, measuring every word, but his arrogance seeped through the cracks. He believed he was in control, interviewing a potential employee, not walking into a trap. Finally, Preston leaned forward. "I occasionally encounter obstacles in my business ventures, obstacles that require creative solutions. Can you handle that kind of work?" "Depends on the obstacle." competitors who don't know when to quit, community groups that protest developments, sometimes even government officials who need persuasion. My jaw clenched. I've handled worse. Preston smiled, the expression cold and calculating. Good, because I may need your services soon. I have a project that's been delayed too long, but I've learned that sometimes you have to clear the path forcibly before you can move forward, like you did with the school. I said it casually, testing. Preston's eyes flickered. Surprise, then suspicion. What school? The elementary school, the one that got shot up. Smart move, clearing the land that way. Cross stiffened, but Preston held up a hand. Careful, Mr. Marshall, that's dangerous speculation. Not speculation, admiration. I leaned back, projecting confidence. It takes guts to handle a problem, that permanently. Most people don't have the stomach for it. Preston studied me for a long moment, then slowly he smiled. You're perceptive. That situation was unfortunate but necessary. The school board refused every reasonable offer, so I found people willing to create circumstances that changed their minds. My blood turned to ice, but I forced a nod. Effective. $50,000 bought me a $200 million project. Best investment I ever made. Preston sipped his whiskey, completely relaxed now, believing he'd found a kindred spirit. The beauty is nobody will ever connect me to it. Gang violence, tragic, but random. The perfect cover. Every word was captured by the device hidden in my jacket. Every casual admission of mass murder recorded with crystal clarity. But then Cross's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression changed. Victor, we should go. What? What? Cross leaned close, whispering something I couldn't hear. Preston's face went pale, then twisted with rage. His eyes snapped to me, cold and deadly. You're wired. Before I could react, 2 bodyguards appeared from nowhere. Hunter Blackwell and another man built like a tank. They grabbed me, hands already searching for the recording device. Found it, Blackwell growled, ripping the wire from inside my jacket. Preston stood, fury radiating from him. Who are you really? I met his eyes, done with pretending. My name is Adrian. You killed my son. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by something worse. Amusement. The school shooting. You're one of those parents. He laughed, sharp and cruel. You have no idea what you've just done. Blackwell's fist connected with my ribs, driving the air from my lungs. I doubled over, but my training kicked in. 12 years of black ops didn't vanish just because I wore a suit. I drove my elbow into Blackwell's throat, then grabbed the other bodyguard's arm and twisted hard enough to hear bone crack. He screamed, stumbling back. The restaurant erupted in chaos. Patrons scattered, staff yelling for help. Preston tried to run, but I was faster. I caught him at the door, slamming him against the wall. You murdered 7 children for money. I hissed in his ear. You don't walk away from that. You can't touch me. Preston spat. I own this city. I'll destroy you. Not if I destroy you first. Sirens wailed outside. Someone had called the police. Blackwell staggered to his feet, reaching for his gun. But I was already moving, disarming him with practiced efficiency, using his own weapon to keep both bodyguards pinned. Cross appeared, phone in hand. The recordings destroyed. You have nothing, but I smiled cold and certain. Rome, that was a decoy. Paige stepped through the restaurant entrance, flanked by 2 federal agents. In her hand, she held a tablet streaming crystal-clear audio. Every word Preston had spoken, captured by a second device hidden in the booth itself. Victor Preston, she said, voice steady and fierce. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Preston's face went white as the agents moved in, handcuffs flashing in the light. The trap had worked. The federal agents moved with precision, flanking Preston on both sides as Paige read him his rights. The restaurant had gone completely silent, every eye fixed on the scene, unfolding like a nightmare Preston never imagined possible. His face cycled through emotions, shock, rage, disbelief, before settling into something cold and calculating. This is a mistake, Preston said smoothly, even with handcuffs clicking around his wrists. Julian, handle this. Cross was already on his phone, barking orders to someone on the other end. Don't say another word, Victor. I'll have you out within the hour. But Paige stepped closer, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Mr. Cross, your client, just confessed to orchestrating the murder of 7 children. There's no bail hearing that saves him from this. That recording was obtained illegally, Cross countered. Entrapment. It'll never hold up in court. Federal agents were present during the entire operation with proper warrants. Paige replied calmly. Everything was by the book. Your client's going away for a long time. Preston's eyes found mine across the room, burning with hatred. You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'll bury you. I'll destroy everything you have left. I stepped forward, every muscle coiled with controlled rage. You already did that when you killed my son. There's nothing left to take. One of the agents pulled Preston toward the door, but he resisted, twisting back to look at me. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly, it is. They dragged him out into the night where police cars lit up the street in red and blue flashes. News vans were already arriving. Cameras capturing every moment as Victor Preston, pillar of the community, wealthy developer, untouchable businessman, was shoved into the back of a federal vehicle. Paige approached me, her expression a mix of relief and concern. Are you all right? My ribs ached where Blackwell had hit me, but I nodded. I'm fine. Is the recording solid? Rock solid. We have everything we need. She hesitated. But Adrian, you need to disappear from this story. Preston's lawyers will come after anyone connected to his arrest. If they find out you were involved, I know I was never here. She handed me a card with a number scrolled on it. This is Agent Mason. He's clean outside Preston's reach. If you need anything, call him. And Adrian? Her voice softened. Thank you for my niece. For all of them. I left through the kitchen exit before more police arrived, slipping into the Denver night like smoke. My part was done. Now came the storm. The story broke nationally within hours. Every major network led with the same headline. Wealthy developer arrested for hiring gang to murder school children. Lee, the recording of Preston's confession played on loop, his casual admission, his cold calculation, his complete lack of remorse. Social media exploded. Outrage swept across the country like wildfire. I watched from my motel room as Preston's carefully constructed empire crumbled on live television. His company's stock plummeted. Business partners released statements, distancing themselves. Politicians who'd taken his campaign contributions scrambled to return the money. The mayor called for a full investigation into every project Preston had ever touched. Judge Quinton Marshall was placed on immediate suspension pending corruption charges. Evidence of bribes and illegal campaign contributions poured out as investigators tore through Preston's finances. The district attorney announced a task force to review every case where Preston had been involved, looking for other crimes, other victims. Preston's arraignment was a media circus. Cameras packed the courthouse steps as he arrived in handcuffs, orange jumpsuit replacing his expensive suits. His face was haggarded, the arrogance stripped away to reveal the desperate man beneath. Julian Cross stood beside him, still fighting, still spinning narratives about entrapment and false evidence. But the judge, a federal appointee with no connection to Preston's corruption network, denied bail. Given the severity of the charges and the defendant's substantial resources, the court considers him a significant flight risk. Bail is denied. Trial date is set for 3 months from today. Preston's face went white. For the first time, he understood that his money, his power, his connections, none of it mattered anymore. He was going to prison. I watched the coverage from a diner across town, coffee growing cold in front of me. Satisfaction weared with emptiness inside me. Preston's arrest should have felt like victory, but Oliver was still gone. Nothing I did would bring him back. My phone buzzed. Natalie, I saw the news, she said, voice trembling. Was that you? Yes. A long pause. Is it over? Almost. Come home, Adrian, please. I need you soon, I promise. But there were still loose ends. Kyle, Tristan, and the others. Their disappearances would eventually draw attention. And I wasn't naive enough to believe no one had noticed the pattern. 2 days later, Detective Morgan showed up at my motel room door. I'd half expected her, but it still sent adrenaline spiking through my veins. Adrian, she said, leaning against the doorframe. Mind if I come in? I stepped aside, letting her enter. She surveyed the sparse room, the maps I'd already packed away, the laptop closed and locked, the careful absence of anything incriminating. Hell of a thing, Preston getting arrested, she said casually. But the families are relieved. I imagine so. She turned to face me, eyes sharp and assessing. Funny thing though, 3 of the shooters from that night, they're gone. Kyle Chun vanished without a trace. Tristan Wade found dead from an apparent overdose, though the talk screen was strange. And Dominic Martinez, his body was just found in a warehouse, throat cut. My expression remained neutral. Gang, life's dangerous. Sure is. She walked slowly around the room, hands in her pockets. You know what else is funny? You used to be military black ops if my research is correct. The kind of training that teaches you how to track people, neutralize threats, and disappear without leaving evidence. That was a long time ago. Was it? Morgan stopped in front of me, because it seems like someone with exactly those skills went hunting after the school shooting. Someone who knew what they were doing. Someone motivated by personal loss. Silence stretched between us. I could feel the interrogation, the trap being laid, but I kept my face calm. Finally, Morgan sighed. Here's the thing, Adrian. I've been a cop for 20 years. I've seen a lot of bad people walk free, because the system failed. Lawyers who twist evidence, judges who get bought, witnesses who disappear. It's frustrating as hell. She met my eyes directly. So when I see someone like you, a father who lost everything, and I see gang members start dropping dead, part of me wants to investigate. But another part of me, she paused. That part thinks maybe some justice happens outside courtrooms. My pulse slowed. What are you saying? I'm saying the evidence connecting you to those deaths is circumstantial at best. I'm saying I have bigger cases to worry about than dead gang members who massacred children. I'm saying she moved toward the door, then looked back. I'm saying you should go home to your wife, Adrian. Be with her, heal, and maybe stop looking over your shoulder. She left without waiting for a response. I stood there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Morgan knew she'd figured it out, but she was letting it go, her own sense of justice overriding her duty to the law. It was time to go home. I packed up the motel room, erasing every trace of my presence. The laptop went into a storage unit under a false name. The remaining gear went back into the lockbox, sealed away again, hopefully forever this time. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Every mile brought me closer to Natalie, to the life we'd have to rebuild from ashes. I didn't know what that looked like yet. Didn't know if we could ever truly heal from losing Oliver. But I knew one thing. Preston would pay for what he'd done. The trial would be public, brutal, and thorough. The world would know his name as the monster who murdered children for profit. And when they finally locked him away for life, maybe, just maybe, there would be a small measure of peace. I pulled into our driveway as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Natalie appeared at the door, silhouetted against the warm light from inside. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two broken people trying to find their way back from darkness. Then she ran to me, and I held her as she cried. "It's done," I whispered. "It's finally done." She pulled back, searching my face. All of it, all of it. We stood there in the driveway, holding each other as night fell around us. Somewhere in the city, Preston sat in a cell awaiting trial. Somewhere, families grieved for children who should still be alive. And somewhere, justice, however messy and imperfect, had finally been served. Preston's trial became the kind of spectacle that stops a nation. Every major network covered it live. Courtroom sketches filled newspapers. Legal experts dissected every moment. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, financial trails, testimony from Ryder who'd been granted immunity in exchange for cooperation. Preston's lawyers fought hard, but there was no defense for a man caught on tape casually admitting he'd orchestrated the murder of 7 children for profit. The families attended every day of the trial. Parents who'd lost their babies sat in the front rows, silent and united. Natalie and I were there too, holding hands through the testimony, through the graphic crime scene photos, through Preston's pathetic attempts to claim he'd been joking or misunderstood. When the jury returned after only 4 hours of deliberation, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. 7 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, racketeering. The judge's sentencing was swift and merciless. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. 7 consecutive life sentences to be exact. Preston's face crumbled as they let him away. No more expensive suits. No more arrogance. Just a broken man facing the rest of his existence in a cage. Judge Marshall was disbarred and sentenced to 15 years for corruption. Julian Cross lost his law license and faced criminal charges of his own. The entire network of corruption Preston had built came crashing down like dominoes. But the real moment of peace came weeks later on a quiet morning in early spring. Natalie and I drove to the cemetery where Oliver rested. The grass had grown over his grave dotted with wild flowers we'd planted. I knelt beside the headstone, tracing his name with my fingers. "We got him, buddy," I whispered. "Preston's never getting out. He'll spend the rest of his life knowing he lost everything because of what he did to you." Natalie placed fresh flowers by the stone, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. I hope you're at peace now, baby. I hope you know we never stopped fighting for you. I pulled my old military dog tags from my pocket. Those were the ones I had carried through a dozen missions, through years of darkness I had tried so hard to forget. I set them down carefully against Oliver's headstone. I'm finished with that life, I said quietly. No more hunting, no more violence. I'm staying right here with your mom. We're going to think of you every single day and try to build something good out of all this pain. Natalie took my hand and squeezed it tightly. For the first time since that horrible December night, something that looked like hope flickered across her eyes. He'd be proud of you, she whispered. He'd be proud of both of us. We sat there together as the sun climbed higher, slowly warming the cold ground around us. Birds sang overhead, and the world kept turning the way it always does. Oliver was gone, but his memory stayed with us, and Preston's conviction meant that 7 families finally had the answers they deserved, finally had real justice. The healing wasn't going to be fast or simple. Some nights Natalie still woke up crying. Some days I still saw Oliver's face the moment I closed my eyes, but we were finally facing it together now. No more secrets sitting between us. No more darkness pulling us apart from each other. Preston's development company fell apart completely. The land where the school once stood was bought by the city and turned into a memorial park instead, 7 trees planted for 7 children, with benches carrying their names where families could come sit and remember them. Detective Morgan came by our house once, months after everything had settled. She didn't ask any questions. She simply handed me a file marked closed and said, "Sometimes the system actually works. Sometimes it just needs a little help along the way. Either way, justice was served." I never opened that file. I didn't need to. Life kept moving forward the way it always does. Natalie went back to work eventually. I started volunteering with a victims' rights organization, helping other grieving families navigate the impossible aftermath of violence they never should have had to face. We talked about Oliver all the time, not avoiding his memory, but honoring it, keeping him alive through every story we told each other. Preston would spend the rest of his life in prison. The shooters were gone. The corrupt officials faced their own reckoning in time, and 7 families, ours included, could finally start the long, slow journey towards something that resembled peace again. Standing together in our kitchen one evening, Natalie looked at me, tears gathering in her eyes. "Do you think we'll ever really be okay again?" she asked. I pulled her close against me. "I think we'll be different," I said. "But yes, I believe we'll be okay, because that's exactly what parents do. We survive, we keep fighting. And when the world takes everything away from us, we find some way to keep breathing, keep moving forward, keep honoring the children we loved more than life itself." Oliver's Christmas play never got the chance to finish that night, but his story, and the justice that eventually followed it, would echo far longer than any performance ever could have.